Hey everyone, how's it going? So today we're going to be making a random password generator using PHP. If you don't know PHP that well or this gets confusing, feel free to check out the tutorial I just made. I'll leave a link in the description. It's my part 1 tutorial of backend PHP development, and it will teach you pretty much everything you need in order to understand what's going on in this video. So hopping right into it, the first thing that we're going to want to do is make a new file. Let's call this main.php. You can call it whatever you want though, but that's what I'm calling it. We're going to want to put the opening PHP tag here, and then we need to decide what we're going to need for this project. So I'm going to be grabbing the input from the terminal. Now in PHP you'd usually be grabbing input from a form or an API or something, but for this project we're just going to be using the terminal to keep it simple. The first thing we're going to need is a character count. So let's say char count, right? Because all passwords have a certain amount of characters. Sometimes it's 8, sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 4. And then they also have a capital letter count. Special characters. And chars is just an abbreviation for characters. And lastly, there's numeric characters. Now we're going to get all of this from the command line. We can do that by setting it equal to a function called readLine, and then we pass the string that we want to display on the command line. So I'm going to say how many characters should the password be. I'm going to copy that and paste it all in here. Forgot to copy the equal sign. Now I'm just going to change the verbiage a little bit. Let's say how many capital characters, how many special characters, and how many numeric characters. And just to show you it's working, let's echo out the char count and run this. I'm going to open my terminal. In Visual Studio Code, there's a little short code. You can just hold Control and press tilde. If you don't know what tilde is, it's the button to the left of the I, usually on the keyboard, right above tab. And inside this, I'm going to run php main.php. How many characters? Let's say 2. I'm just going to say 2 for all of them, and we get 2 back, which is exactly what we want. I'm going to get rid of that. Now the next step is going to be validating the user input. So we're going to make a function and call that validate input. We're going to make a function because we have to validate each one of these. So we don't want to copy and paste a lot of code. Now, basically what validating input is we don't know what the users are going to type, right? So we need to figure out what they could type that could potentially break our program. And then if they type that, we need to send back an error message and kill the program before our program breaks. So one thing they could do is they could put letters in our program, and that would kill it, because the rest of our program is going to expect all of these to be numbers. So for example, let's say char count equals, and let's set it equal to validate input. And we're going to pass char count. This is going to be the parameter it will take in. We can call that input. The reason for this is that even though they're technically numbers, they're numbers that are strings. We can say inval and just pass the parameter, which for us is input. And what this will do is, let's say you have a string that's a 2, it'll take that in and it'll spit out a regular 2. So we could say input equals that, and then we can return the input. Now something to keep in mind is that if the string is a letter, it's actually going to turn this into a 0. So let's say we have the word the. It's going to know that the isn't a number. It's going to spit out a 0. So we also have to account for if somebody enters a 0, right? Maybe you have 0 special characters. To do this, I'm going to use a ternary statement. I didn't cover this in my last video, but it should be. And if you get confused at all, you can always just use an if-else instead. I'm going to say input equals 0. So if input's equal to 0, it's basically what this is saying. The if statement comes before the question mark, and then what you do if it's true comes after. So if it's equal to 0, we'll just set it to -1. Because that's basically going to do the same thing in our code. We won't be giving any, we won't be considering that there are any, because that's basically going to do the same thing as what we want. Because that's basically going to do the same thing as a 0 in our code. We won't see that there are actually any values that we can use, and the 0 won't become an issue for us. Now you can put a colon, which is essentially the else, right? So you have everything in between the question mark and colon, and then everything after the colon is the else. So if input is not equal to 0, we can just copy this and paste it and set it equal to the inval of input. Now let's validate it. Let's say if input equals 0, let's echo out error, input error, all entries must be numbers. And then let's call die. Die is just going to stop our program from running so we won't get an error in our code later, and we'll have to restart it. Okay, now let's test this. Let's say test 222. We got an error. Let's test it with a valid number, 2222. No error. Perfect. That's exactly what we want here. Now that we know it's working, we can do the same thing for the other 4, or sorry, the other 3. So let's say capital, special, and numeric. Now we have one last test that we should run outside of this function. Something else that could cause a problem is if the sum of capital, special, and numeric characters is more than the total character count, right? Because let's say you tell me you need a password with 20 characters, or you know what, let's say you tell me you need a password with 2 characters, and you say you want 5 of them to be capital, and 2 of them to be special, and 6 of them to be numeric. I just can't do that, right? That's not possible. So what we're going to say here is if char count is less than, and then a parenthesis, and now we can add all these together. So special chars plus capital chars plus numeric chars. And inside of this, we can do the same thing we just did. Echo statement should be different. Let's say the sum of all the types of characters must be less than the total character count. All right, now let's run this and see what we get. So let's say 2555. We got the error we wanted. Let's make sure we don't get it if we put a valid one. 10, 222. Perfect. Our code is working exactly how we want it to work. Now we can start generating the password. So let's make a function. Let's call it generate password. This is going to take in 2 parameters, the characters and a password. and it's going to return the password. Also, sorry, I forgot about this, but at the top we should really be defining our password, right? So let's set password equal to an empty string. No spaces or anything in it, just 2 quotes. Now, what we're going to need here is to first show all of the possibilities that this could be. So let's say charList equals an array and inside of this array let's have regular, which is going to equal an array, and then capital, numeric, and special. Now for the inputs, I'm just going to copy and paste them. I'll put them in the description if you just want to quick copy and paste them as well. If you ever need something like this and you don't feel like typing it all out, especially if it's like, you know, all the states in America or something like that, you can usually just Google it and find an array of them that people have posted. And there's probably more special characters than just this, but these are the only ones I'm going to use. Let's var dump a function called array underscore rand, and we're going to pass it 2 things. The first here is going to be charList regular, and the second is going to be char count. And you'll see what we get here is 10 random indexes. All of these indexes are going to be for this regular array. Alright, now what we can do is we could set this equal to a variable. So let's say random numbers equals all of this, and then let's say for each random numbers as a random number, and now let's just echo out the value. And you'll see it's working. We're getting random numbers. But what we can do now is instead of this, we could echo out charList regular and then grab the value. And look at that, we're getting random letters, which is exactly what we want for this password generator. So I'm going to copy all this code below the function, and I'm going to put it inside the function. I'm also going to add one more variable here in the parameter. I'm going to add char type. I'm going to call the function, pass it capital chars, the string capital, and my password. And I'm going to say that password equals this. Below that, I'm going to echo out your password is, then I'm going to just give the password. Now inside of this function, one thing that I have to do is I have to find each spot where it says char count, replace that with chars, and each spot where it says the string regular, get rid of the string altogether, and inside of the brackets say char type. And instead of echoing this out, we're going to say password period equals. Now period equals is just a way to concatenate a string when you're setting it equal to something. So it's going to take everything password already equals and add it to the end. We're also going to get rid of the space because we don't need it. And I'm going to change this equals at the very bottom to period equals as well, which will be important for later. So there we go. Right now our password is only capital E, capital Y, but we're going to fix that. Before we fix it, one thing I want to do is each time we're going to run one of these, we should first check the values we're passing to this function are greater than 0. So let's say if capital chars is greater than 0, then we run this. And if you're just putting one line after an if statement, you don't actually need a bracket. As you'll see, it'll still run, it won't give me an error. Now I'm going to copy all of these. And we're going to make this one special chars. Just change the variables. And then this one can be numeric chars. And lastly, for regular chars, we're going to make a new variable, call this regular chars, and this is going to equal the char count minus, and then we're going to basically do the same thing that we did up here in this if statement, where we're going to add all of these together. And before we run this, let's just get rid of this password. I forgot to get rid of it when I added char type. And we're going to make a new variable called password, which is going to equal a blank string. We should also make sure that this is an array before we run this. So what we can do is say if get type random numbers equals an array. We can run this block. Then we can say here is if it doesn't equal it, else basically take this and instead say random numbers. Now the reason for this is because if someone were to pass in a 1, which I'll show you in a minute, it would actually not be grabbing, it would not create an array because there's only one value. So if I run this, you'll see I want 10 characters, 4 capital, 1 special, and 3 numeric. And there we go, we get a random password. But if I hadn't added that code, it actually would have given me an error because I was trying to do a for each loop on only one variable, which is the exclamation point here. But look at that, it's a beautiful random password. There's just one problem with it. The problem here is that it does capital, and then the special, and then the numbers, and then the lowercase. It's still a random password, but it's not the best. Fortunately, PHP has a really cool function built into it, so we actually don't have to do that much here. All we have to do is say password, regular equal sign, str for string, underscore, shuffle, and then pass the password. And it's going to take our string and randomly shuffle up the letters. So let's run it again. This time let's give it 20. Let's make a big one. Let's say 5 capital, 2 special, and 4 numeric. And look at that. That's a super random password. It'd be pretty hard to guess that. Our program is now fully functional, and it actually wasn't that hard and only took about 62 lines of code. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you did, let me know, and check out my channel. I'm going to be posting some more tutorials on PHP soon, and I'm also going to be making 2 more projects. One's going to be a cryptocurrency bot in PHP, which is basically just going to trade crypto based on the code you give it, and it does it automatically. The other one I'm going to be doing is a backend web dev API. So if you ever wanted to learn how to build an API, I'm going to be doing that in PHP as well. I hope you have a great day. Take it easy.